get out of your comfort zone or you're not going to succeed because you're creating your own suffocation, your own governor on what you can do and what the company needs you to do. And if you're not going to do it, we're going to get somebody in here that will.
I'm your host, Nick McLean, and this is Ambition. We all have mentors, teachers, parents, people in our past that influenced us to be who we are today. I remember my first boss while I was interning in college. He impressed upon me the importance of presentation, and it isn't just the message, but how you deliver that message as being one of the keys to whether or not you can be successful and influential, really. Tim Webster is a dynamic and inspiring leader, someone I've known for a while in a lot of different arenas, mostly around looking at deals together. A Kansas City-based man, he's the CEO of Farmer Direct Foods and the chairman and CEO of Heirloom Brands. Specifically listen for Tim's diamond metaphor, how he relates every element of a business to facets and their key role in the total value of a diamond. Tim sees value in his leadership. He finds creative solutions to problems as simple as employee attendance, which every business deals with. But I love the way Tim handled it. Success is often seen as achieving a goal, but it's so much more than that. It's about the journey, the growth, and the lessons we learn along the way. On today's episode of Ambition, we're diving into what success truly means in our lives and how it's constantly evolving.
To have a great mentor, you have to be ready to be a mentee. Which means you have to keep your mouth shut and listen and be pushed and be challenged. There needs to be enough frequency and engagement that the mentor really knows what it is you're dealing with. I think one of the pitfalls I see a lot of entrepreneurs making is they kind of go around and take a poll, giving people incomplete briefings, getting absolute nonsensical advice because the briefing is either skewed towards what they want to hear or not complete, doesn't include the hairy, gory, nasty part. And so you don't really give the mentor a chance to get in there and work on you because you're selectively choosing the topics or the way the briefing is constructed. So I think poll taking is really dangerous. And what I'm talking about is someone that was my boss and my business partner whose reputation was on the line, putting a 28-year-old in a seat that he didn't belong in. So we got thick, and there were times that he sent me home in tears. I'd love to tell you a couple of those, where one time I was complaining. Do you have time for two of these stories that are unforgettable for me? Both very embarrassing at the time and left me in tears. So first one, I was whining and complaining about how much time I was spending in the job, having been in public accounting and, junior guy. Now all of a sudden I'm running this company. And he said, young man, I could do that job in 15 to 20 hours a week. Maybe you should think more about what you're spending your time on instead of how much time you're spending.
Wow.
And he said, I see you doing all this stuff that's in your comfort zone. You're redoing the CFO's work because that's where you came from and that's where you're comfortable. Instead of stretching yourself, get out there and sell something, get out of your comfort zone, go do the rest of the job. Now, that was very eye-opening and, like jarring. And the second one was the company that the reason I got that opportunity was things weren't going particularly swimmingly at the time. And I said, I feel like I'm a beginning surfer and you're throwing me into the sea in 50-foot waves because this is really a challenging set of circumstances. And like he often would, he was already shaking his head halfway through my question. And he said, no, a better analogy is if you can't hunt the bears when they're outside the woods taunting you, you'll never be able to hunt the bears when they're in the woods hiding from you in terms of the opportunities and the problems. And, another one that 30 plus years ago, I remember the feeling in my body as we were driving from the facility down to the plaza to have dinner, just searing, sort of embarrassment, but profound teaching and vivid permanent learning that, you're fortunate if the problems you face are so obvious that you know exactly what needs to be done, even if it's daunting to fix them. The harder part is when you got a business that's kind of hitting on all cylinders and you got to squeeze another 300 basis points of growth or 150 basis points of margin out of it, and you got no idea how to do that. That's really skillful.
And sure, and you can also bring up the idea that whenever a company appears to be firing on all cylinders, or at most many of the cylinders, they might be doing good. But is there enough? Is there enough desire within the organization as a whole to make that leap from good to great? Sometimes the leader can motivate the troops and has hired right, I guess, to make sure that there is that internal desire to go to good to great. But sometimes, unless the wheels are falling off the bus, people are happy. I mean, have you been in that situation before?
Yeah, I mean, I can hear him again in my ear. He would say, "Well done, pleased, but don't be satisfied. Pleased, but not satisfied." And so there was that relentlessness. He hated complacency. Really kind of resented it. So there is that, like, and he used a metaphor, another example of a diamond, which has like 40 facets when you look at how a diamond's really cut. And if there's one of those facets is flawed, the diamond may not be worth very much. But if it's flawless, then it's, has exponential value. And so he was constantly pointing out that price and promotion and packaging and product and promotion and all that all interrelate like a diamond. And if one of the, and people say, well, I think I just need to lower the price, he would just smile and say, how does that interrelate with all the other things? And that's what really got me energized, humbled, excited to go on that journey, because that idea that all the facets interrelate and it's never perfect, but I used that later in life with the Zycar company that I was involved in here locally and we had some success with. We would walk around and say, what facet of the diamond are we polishing today? What's our weakest link? Is it product? Is it service? Is it sales? Is it price? Because it's too easy and lazy to just say we just need to lower the price and we'll sell more.
Well, I tell you what, we're talking about phrases that we remember from mentors and whatnot. And I can't go so far as to say this professor of mine in business school was a mentor, just because we didn't maintain a relationship afterwards. But he had a very popular or well remembered saying, "Any idiot can lower prices." And that is one that really stuck with me. In every time I think about pricing strategy, that's the first comment or philosophy that comes to mind. I think your mentor would share that sentiment.
I've had some great salespeople, and some of them may listen to this, so I want to be real careful. But it is typically the salesperson that wants to lower price to make it easier to make the sale. And when in that business, which was significant, we had enough money to do some research, and we found that inside our consumer segment, there actually were 3 distinct segments. One, and roughly they were the same size. The bottom third, bottom price, no matter what. So if you're the branded player, unless you're going to go down and go underneath the private label or the store brand, you're not going to get that price-oriented buyer, and it's only a third of the market. And if you're constantly focused on price, you're dragging the next 2 segments down who really don't care about price. And the top one was brand loyalists. They were like, you should be advertising about loyalty and nostalgia and building your connectivity, and they don't care about price. It's because it's what grandma used, and you got them. So price isn't going to do one thing other than maybe sell them 3 boxes instead of them coming back and paying full price the next 2 times they're in the store. And then the middle ones were brand switchers, and they normally were driven more by usage suggestions or more active marketing, an influencer recommendation or what have you. And they weren't really price driven. They were trying to come up with a solution for an outcome that they were trying to create. So that was very, very eye opening. The amount of destruction of value we were doing, thinking we were growing our business through volume, and all we were really doing was pulling future full price sales into the pantry at a discounted price and taking shoppers out of the category for weeks at a time. So that was one where we had the benefit. I'm grateful that we were lucky enough to have the resources to really get to the answer. And that ended the conversations about lowering the price with the sales organization.
Not surprised. I'll tell you that a very common topic that we talk about here is culture. Now, I heard you talk about the 40 different facets of a diamond that you want to polish, and which one are we going to focus on today? My question is, as you've thought about implementing a culture within your company or companies, is it something that you do by your actions, or is it something more intentional that you do to establish a culture as opposed to people just learning from you?
That's such a great question, Nick. Because this new company is, 30 months old, we acquired a business that had been around for a long time, and some of the folks stayed with. So it's a combination of folks that were with the company prior to us acquiring it, and then our new team that we put together and assembled post acquisition. And so I think the answer is it's both, but I don't believe culture is words that the CEO types up and gets into an engraved plaque and puts at the front door. I think it's much more like parenting, or like when you think you're parenting, you're like telling them how they ought to behave. They're watching you and how you behave, when you're frustrated, when you're happy, when you're winning, when you're losing. So I think it's much more to me the collective behavior, but I do think there should be aspirational aspects of it that get vetted by the team, that are collaborated on and challenged. And then there has to be accountability, both positive accountability in terms of having a system to say, I see you doing what it says in the manifesto or in our vision statement, and I want to thank you for that. But then also, hey, I don't think you're living up to it today. And I beg my team to hold each other accountable, including me, to those attributes. And so we wrote up I guess the word manifesto has a bunch of controversy associated with it, but that's what we called it at the time. And it describes a feeling, or there's things in it like, we will compete aggressively and we will win new business, and winning will become a norm, and we will do what it takes to win new business. We will create a repeatable, sustainable business system that ensures that we meet customers' expectations, and we will intentionally interject things that are intended to be unexpected delights, whether that's a handwritten note, that goes, or sending a note after that says, you just ordered a truckload of our product, which saved 25,000 gallons of water because we use dry farming relative to conventional agriculture. So we want to surprise and delight our customers, because life can become very mundane. And we want to be a breath of fresh air when folks do business with us, based on how we deal with problems, and then the fact that we intentionally reach out with what we believe would be something that would be an unexpected delight. We describe it with music and textures and colors and feelings. Like it says, we will celebrate our ultimate outcome and destiny, with the top down, listening to rock and roll, driving down the highway with a peaceful, easy feeling. So I tried to make it such that somebody would read the thing and they'd say, I want to work here, or this is nuts. This place isn't for me. So it's a big part of our onboarding to share that description, which in reality is only probably 10 sentences long or something, but it conveys a lot in terms of, after 40 years of doing this is probably my last one where I'm, the lead dog, in the CEO role. And I want it to be special, and I want it to be special for them, because now I see that over the top kind of activity. Our head of quality just drove with her mom and three kids from the mill to Dallas 3 different times to get the conversion done with a bakery. Normally it's very easy to convert. This one was challenging. There was something in the water or in the ingredient systems or something. And, she loaded up her three kids, grabbed her mom, and drove down there, worked all night in the bakery with the bakers, and had her mom drive her back. And, the company that we're working with is just like, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've never had a flour supplier call me, come to my location. And, so that's the kind of thing that the culture evokes. and we celebrated the heck out of that and delighted the customer. So and my team has been very generous with me, saying you're living the values at the end of the day, and you're showing us what those words mean. And occasionally they'll say, not so much today, Tim, but generally spoken, it's a holistic thing. It was collectively created, and then there's collective accountability about whether we're living up to it.
But to your credit, over time you've built up the reserves of social capital, so that when you don't live the values, maybe some of the deposits go the other way as opposed to into it, but you've built those up so that your team can come to you and have those conversations, knowing that tomorrow you're going to be building that balance back up.
And I'm a terrible poker player, so they're like, "Okay, you're frustrated. Are you going to pretend and not tell us what you're upset about, or are we going to get to it straight away?" Because transparency is one of our core issues. That's probably where I get called out the most. They're like, "Okay, we can feel it.
Yeah.
You're disappointed. You're upset, and you're trying to be a diplomat and run a good meeting. So let's get real here and tell us what you're upset about, and then maybe we can do something about it." So.
I know you're not going to be surprised to hear this, but I worked for a publicly traded company, and I remember I can't remember how many values they had. Maybe 8, maybe only 5. But one of the values was integrity. The other one was honesty. And I'm so turned off by that. I mean, if you have to tell the company or tell your employees that integrity is something you care about, I mean, those are just table stakes, I feel like. That's not how you motivate the troops, is telling people that you're just not going to lie. And that's why I think your version of implementing a culture is definitely going to resonate with some, and it's not going to resonate with others. And that might be the most attractive aspect of it, because during the recruiting process, you're probably sharing elements of your culture, and people will self-select in or out based off what they're hearing, I would expect.
I think so, and I think ultimately, this goes way back to my early years, and this was a place where it wasn't from my mentor; it was my gut instinct. I'm like, we're asking these people. We were running around the clock. We're asking these people get out of bed, spend 8 to 12 hours away from their family, doing very repetitive things, and that either is like sucking, 1/1000th of your life energy out of you every day, and your meter's just kind of going down, or we got to find a way, even in repetitive work, to have it be life-giving and have a way to plug into the charger and refill. And we did a lot of work with industrial psychologists around that to understand, there's some of it was just around safety and security. There was an old book, Who Moved My Cheese, that was around the fact that if you make too much change, people get spooked, and they in that instability feels like job insecurity, even if you're doing the right things to make the company better, which is the only way real security is created. But we did a lot of, like, attendance was a big thing. Big expensive plant. If it wasn't running, we were losing a lot of money. So attendance was really important. And if people were really sick, we didn't want them to come in. But if they just chose not to come in, then they were burdening the rest of the team. So every system I studied, not every, but the vast majority of the systems I studied were negative reinforcement based, like 3 absences, you're out, 7 tardies, you're out. And I was like, I hate that, because then you got the sword over your head and what have you. So I was like, why don't we flip it and explain to them why it's so important that if they're not sick, that they show up for the good of the team, for the good of the department, for the good of the company, for the good of the customer, and got linkage to the fact that if you show up and make 1,000 instead of 5,000, ultimately, if you extrapolate that, that's how it does real damage to the company. So we started to create a positive thing around attendance, and we had people earning like 25% more than their base because they showed up every day and rewarded the behavior we wanted, instead of trying to negatively eradicate the behavior we didn't want. And we explained it all and said, look at your neighbor. Like, if you say, I'm just not feeling it, those 3 have to do it and cover for you. Or ultimately, if too many of you do it, we got to shut down. So I didn't want it to be negative energy. I wanted it to be, and then if somebody volunteered and knew that Nick's kid has got an important basketball game tonight and he's scheduled to work. I volunteer to cover for him. Well, we would pay that person a premium, even if they weren't in overtime, for that noble gesture to keep things humming and to look out for your neighbor. And that was a huge cultural flip flop relative to we were hiring people away from big unionized plants like the Ford plant, what have you. And they were just like, this is just such an incredible breath of fresh air. Tell them why, and then recognize and reward when you get the behavior you're looking for.
I'm glad you went down this path regarding folks that work in repetitive roles, because I've had some other guests on the show, one of which was for a not-for-profit based organization, so the employees could really get behind the mission that the nonprofit was trying to serve, and also a faith-based organization where a lot of the team could get behind the faith as part of the culture, as part of the unifying spirit, if you will. It's really helpful and instructive to hear how you've been able to take folks in repetitive roles and make their jobs meaningful without something like religion or the greater good, so to speak, in order to use that as a motivational tool. So hats off. And now my challenge to some of those widget manufacturers is you're off the hook now. You've heard from Tim that he's able to do it. Learn from Tim so that you can apply that to your own workforce.
Well, if that has that impact, that would be great, because we did things like, so ultimately the industrial psychologists we worked with got to the question that people would ask, does it make any difference whether I make 1,000 or 5,000? Does it make any difference whether I show up and mail it in or lean in and go for a new record? So we had this kind of digital thing that every time somebody set a record on a machine, they were up on the big board until somebody knocked them off that big board. And I tried to, as hard as I could, we had, a system where they could see the company's goals and then my goals and my leadership team's goals. And I'm doing it this way. I actually prefer to do it that way, so that then somebody knew that if my machine has a range of 1,000 to 5,000 units a day, if I consistently do 1,000, here's the impact on the company long term, especially if everyone in that position does the same thing. Whereas if we can do 5,000 consistently, here's the impact. So the thing was, does it matter? And I would say, yes, it does matter. And we use this analogy of the battle for market share is it's not war. I mean, come on, it's just business. But metaphorically, it has more power if it's like a fence row, or and we're either gaining ground, taking share from our competitors, or we're coming back. The fence is coming back at us, and they're taking share from us. They're winning the promotional battle this week at Kroger, or So I was like, this is a constantly dynamic, ever changing situation we're in, and what we do every day influences where that fence row is. You may not be able to feel it, like you have a bad day or we have a bad day in the plant, that we already see it in the IRI or Nielsen data, that we lost market share. But if you start the habit, then sooner or later that fence is coming back at you, and you're going to start to see bad numbers, and you're going to start losing distribution, and you're going to start losing customers. So that creating that tension, that it wasn't necessarily intended to be stress. It was just intended to be, the reality is what you do matters. And it matters in terms of our collective well-being and our collective job security and how the company's doing. And if you can create that linkage, especially in those repetitive tasks where it's not fun and interesting and you don't have big victories, went out and made 5 sales calls and got us a new customer, And I would always say to my leadership team, you guys and gals make a lot of money. So I'm not going to worry too much about motivating you. You've established yourself. You've chosen to be here. You have an incentive plan tied to the outcomes you create. But how do we create that sensation throughout the organization? And that we spend a lot of time on that. And we do that today. And you just have to make sure you take the time to meaningfully, authentically, genuinely demonstrate that what you're doing out there matters. And if that's the sanitation department cleaning the corners where they could easily, skip that today, and then you get cited on the audit, the next time, it's just, how do you keep that push yourself to be your best? And the reason is because everybody here is dependent on you to do it.
I would also add, though, that it sounds like part of your culture is the reinforcement of it's not just today, it's the consistency of doing it every day. And that's why, in the long run, one day does matter because if you have too many of those one off occurrences, then it builds up over time. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I always at the end hear these old voices and tapes in my head. I'm like, hey, the other guys are doing push-ups at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they're doing their jumping jacks and their now burpees used to be called squat thrusts, and they're working to come get us. Come get our customers, come get our market share. So don't rest on your laurels, and don't get complacent, but don't get cocky either.
Well, I think it'd be helpful to hear a little bit about your business and the products, but I would like that to be a segue as you think about what your marketing strategy is. You talked about how you like your overall strategy is to steal share, as opposed to some might say stimulating demand. Also, though, another question I would think about is as it relates to this question the idea of whether or not you feel like your product is commoditized and if part of your marketing strategy is to at least make it feel to the end user that it is not a commoditized product.
Very good. So we acquired Farmer Direct Foods 30 months ago, which is in one of the, very large, but, you know, could be perceived as sleepy categories in baking flour. So, how are you going to create something interesting and dynamic in flour? So there have been some good brands before us, like King Arthur Baking and Bob's Red Mill, that began to build the artisanal, more craft for the home baker. That was not a small undertaking to say, Grandma used gold medal, Mom used gold medal. But now I'm a King Arthur person because I've looked at what King Arthur's all about, and I think there is a difference. And I don't believe it's all the same. So, in the category that we're in, there has been a segmentation over the last 2 decades. Building, I use the Christmas tree analogy, where the base of the market is the store brand, and the lower price, long-standing, more commodity-oriented brands. Try to keep my competitors' names out of my mouth. Sometimes it backfire, but and then there's also been the move, how did everybody all of a sudden end up being allergic to gluten in the last 10 years? So there's also these flares of almond, tapioca, gluten-free products. So in a very very high household penetration, but a sleepy category. So there has been some evolution. So we bought Farmer Direct with two primary, highly differentiated attributes. One is invoked by the name of the company, Farmer Direct. If you look at our logo, it's a little green truck that you would see at the farmer's market. It's intended to evoke that experience of Farmer Direct. You're buying it direct from the farmer. In this case, you don't have to drive all the way to Western Kansas to get yourself a bag of wheat. We'll do it for you. But it's traceable all the way back to the seed variety, the seed dealer, the grower, what kind of inputs, no glyphosate, no Roundup. We have very stringent growing condition requirements to be part of our group. And then, so we call that traceability. The company previously trademarked the phrase identity assured, which I really like. So we've adopted that. So we call it IA. And then the second differentiating point is environmentally friendly. Now that we call it sustainable. It's also now the buzzword that's coming into the consumer consciousness is regenerative agriculture. Only about 20% of consumers today know what that means. They know that there's probably another 15 to 20% that think it, have some halo associated with it, but they can't tell you exactly what it means. What it essentially means is we don't release carbon into the atmosphere because we don't till the soil. And so we keep roots in the ground all year long. And we rotate crops. So you can't just farm wheat over and over and over again, or you end up taking all the nutrients out of the soil, the organic density, the organic matter, and you end up with the risk of the Dust Bowl, which is the case study of the history of what happens if you rape the soil, and then somebody gets angry upstairs and you lose 20 years of productive farming. So regenerative we rotate crops, we rotate livestock who compress nutrient density and moisture into the soil. We don't take water out of the aquifer. We're fortunate to be able to grow this crop in a dry farming method, just the right amount of sub moisture in the soil, along with rain at the right time. It's just the perfect place to grow these varieties of wheat. So we have traceability and sustainability as the two pillars that we thought we can be different enough that we can break through. So the completely insane idea of this little band of warriors I've put together is that we're going to launch a national brand at retail and in institutional markets in a very mature category against very mature, well-funded competitors. But we're gonna shake up the place around that. And what we found is the institutional side and the retail buyers totally get it, but it's very hard to convey all that on the front of a bag of flour as somebody's going down the grocery aisle at 25 miles an hour. So how do we grab them? How do we get attention? And there's a bunch of stuff we're doing there. We're now in all the Sprout stores, so we've got our largest footprint to date to work on our guerrilla marketing tactics, which include micro influencers, macro influencers, in-store promotion, PR, all the different, earned through PR, owned through our own, sites and the things that we control, and then paid are the three different kinds of media that we, utilize to get our message out there and to crack into this very, substantial but, mature space, and make people believe, yeah, that's interesting. I want to try that. Because the good news is, of all the things I talked about, and my marketing guru Neil Sharma, who's on our board and Kansas City legend in marketing and digital, digital business, he said, you forgot delicious in your description. And when we get into these institutional bakers like Farm to Market Bread, where they've now converted 100% to us and they're getting ready to start putting our logo on their bags, which is an incredible honor for us. We're just over the moon. It's also more consistent, because the way it's historically been done, the harvest comes, everybody brings their grain to the elevator, and it all gets commingled and blended to a saleable attribute. We're not doing that. We're buying direct from John Griffith and Dean Hasselhorst and Ron Suppies. And when a truck shows up, it's not this commingled blend. It's all one variety, one seed variety coming off of one farm, and it's absolutely beautiful. The kernels are more consistent. The color is more vibrant, more consistent. And so, not surprisingly, the people that are baking with our product find that the consistency is very noteworthy. And so we didn't start with that, a more consistent baking experience, but that's what the real, you talk about features and benefits. The benefit to most of our bakers is it's just the same every time. And I was in this amazing bakery in Brooklyn last week, and I hope she ends up becoming a customer, because she is amazing and she's a massive social media presence. And she was talking about one of our competitors whose product she uses, and she said, sometimes my croissants are happy and sometimes my croissants are sad, because the stuff I get every week is different. And I thought, what a beautiful way to describe it. And she said, if you can make my croissants happy every week, I will make you famous on social media. So I'm like, challenge accepted. Let's go.
Yeah. The first thing that I thought of, in addition to just being an awesome opportunity, is I wonder if that's a compelling slogan or marketing strategy that you use with other customers. Like, do you want your bread happy or sad? Because we know with your current supplier, you're getting a lot of variability.
And it evokes a feeling, right? Which is in marketing, especially to enthusiasts, that's what you want. You want to evoke a feeling. Sometimes it'll be like analytic, like this has 0.5% more protein and 0.1% less ash. And I think that's important, because I'm a serial chemist. No, you want to evoke exactly as you did it. So I'm going to be quiet because you did it perfectly. So
probably one other topic that I would like to explore. A lot of times we might have on business owners in fragmented industries, think manufacturing, that have done a good job of getting their company from 5 to 10 million in revenue or so. And that's very reflective of the industry. A lot of operators with that maybe 5 to 10 million in revenue. However, very few are able to get beyond that point and grow to 20, 30, 50, 100 million in revenue. Can you just talk a little bit about the challenges that you have faced growing beyond a, let's call it mom and pop operation, to a more sophisticated enterprise?
Yeah, it's another great question. You're good at this, Nick.
Oh,
So
thanks.
I'm distracted by one of the real dynamics in our business, which is the cost of transportation. So like how big is how big is the addressable market, and are you equally compelling or competitive to that entire market? And sometimes that can be vertical based on price and perceived value, or geographic. And the competitive density varies. Like, Brooklyn, I was there. I was in Philly and New York last week calling on Target bakery accounts. It's very competitive because there's a lot of people there and they're real foodies. And so it's very competitively dense, right? And it's hard for me to get the product there transportation wise. So, there's so many different aspects of what would limit somebody's ability to grow from 5 to 10 to 50 to 100. So, how big is the market opportunity? What's the competitive set look like? And then let's just pretend that it is a big addressable market and there aren't really these structural barriers, like you're going to have to be a regional player because you can't afford to ship your steel from Kansas to Montreal, or whatever. So let's just pretend those things don't exist, and that the runway is really open to you if you do it well. So then you get to, is it internal limitations of your ability to scale? Those could be capital, facilities, natural resources. Can you get the talent? I hear a lot of people talking about talent as an obstacle to what the visionaries dream of what it could be. I'm fortunate to be on the board of a couple of software companies in town now, and that has been very eye-opening about how fast you can grow as opposed to making 5-pound bags of flour or what have you. So that is kind of mind-boggling, because then potentially the TAM and your ability to scale is almost unlimited. So I'm much more akin, as you well know, based on my background, to these more making things and having to sell them one at a time. So which you end up selling on a basis of EBITDA, not 10 times revenue, like these sexy software businesses that I'm learning about as an old guy. So I think ultimately, there's all those different factors in play. How big's the market? What's the competitive set? And so Neil, the guy I mentioned earlier, my marketing guru, he calls himself conciliary to the CEO, which I love, is have a very tightly defined target market, a offering that your customer finds irresistible and that you can produce efficiently at scale. And you get those three things lined up, you got a chance to build one of those big ones that you're talking about.
Well, I think you might not have studied some of this as much as I have, simply because of the podcast and some of the guests that I've talked to. But a comment you made earlier was about how you wanted to get out of what I might call the technician role, which is not my term. It's from E-Myth Revisited. So at 28 or 29, you were already forced to get out of your own way in order to grow the business. However, my experience is that a lot of operators of those $10 million revenue businesses haven't learned that they are impeding progress because of their granular involvement in the business. Is that something that you have experienced?
Yeah, no, that's great. I've been, I've done a lot of investing with small businesses and coaching and mentoring with small businesses. So I think sometimes it is the founder's lack of vision, or more likely like prying their white knuckles off the steering wheel and the gas pedal and the brake all at the
Yeah.
same time, because they did it. It's their baby, and they know everything, right? They know everything, and the idea of not knowing everything that's going on is somewhat terrifying. And I certainly understand and empathize with that. And then in YPO, we used to talk about most of those businesses when they evolve from like a solopreneur or a single general manager the first thing they do is hire the ops person and the salesperson, right? And maybe the bean counter. Maybe it's a three-legged stool or a two-legged stool. And, what kind of person are you able to hire if you're going to hire three narrowly defined functional roles inside a $10 million business when you've been doing all those functions yourself? It's almost a self-fulfilling thing if you don't say, in Tarsus, my partners over there use the term the J curve, which I know you know well, the concept that right after you make those investments, it's not going straight up into the right. You're actually going to go down into a valley that, again, that guy that's got his knuckles on the steering wheel and the foot and the brake, both feet on the pedals, is going to be terrified if they do even have the guts to say, I'm going to put on $500,000 more overhead and fill out these roles and let go and let them run and let them make mistakes and let them put the company in harm's way. And that first thing, the new sales guy ticked off a customer because I would have given up on the pricing conversation. And he said, I don't see why we should do that. All of that is the stuff that I would call like the kryptonite or the gravity, that prevents the esprit de corps and the confidence that it takes to take risk, because risk and reward are cousins and you really can't have one without the other. So I think a lot of times it's just, I say I want to grow, I say I want to be rich, I say I want to build a big business, but I'm actually this, which is exactly where you started, where my boss got on me, was like, get out of your comfort zone or you're not going to succeed, because you're creating your own suffocation, your own governor on what you can do and what the company needs you to do. And if you're not going to do it, we're going to get somebody in here that will.
And one comment to that is, I think for the non-business owners out there, they might think that you do some of these things and you're going to have not instant feedback, but at least within a few months. Oh no, you're nowhere near that lucky. It could be years before you finally are able to determine if you did in fact make many of the right decisions.
Yeah, this guy was from Europe, and he would say, the funny thing about you Americans is you think you've solved a problem when you write a new name in the organizational chart. In Europe, we think that's when the problems begin.
Yeah, I love it.
Because you got to coach them up and you got to onboard them and they got to fit into the culture, and the culture has to adapt to make room for the new person. So he's like, you folks all think the grass is greener and that you erase the bad guy's name and put in the new name that you don't know anything about, doesn't know anything about your business, and shazam, great things are going to happen. And, I thought that was a really powerful lesson, because we do tend to idealize and then gradually fall out of love as the realities of somebody show up and their blind spots and their idiosyncratic things that annoy you because, they don't listen well or whatever it is. So that was very eye-opening for me, was to say, and it's the same thing I'm saying to my teams, like, we didn't win that we got on the shelf at Sprouts. We just got in the ring. And now the fight starts.
It's a similar message I share with people that are trying to buy a business. Some folks think that the hard part is buying the business. Oh, no, that's not the hard part. The hard part is actually running the business.
Right.
Well, we've been talking for a little while here. I want to give you the opportunity to share anything you'd like about your businesses, any questions or topics that you feel like I didn't do a good job addressing. Just at least want to give you the opportunity to share anything that you'd like.
Well, on behalf of my marketing department, if people are out there listening and are intrigued by what they heard, please like and follow Farmer Direct Foods on LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook, and spread the word. Go to Sprouts, try a bag. If you like it, spread the word. So I think you've really done a nice job of teeing me up to talk about the things that I'm passionate about and that I believe in. And back to the very kind of core question about finding a mentor, I think most of the people that have been really successful have had mentors. And even if they don't have like one, they have examples of good bosses or professors or what have you. So I would generally say people love to talk about themselves. So the mentee just has to get enough at bats to go out and have the guts to call Barnett Hellsberg and say, I want to buy you a cup of coffee. And I want to tell you a little bit about my story. And Rick Kreska and Danny O'Neill and many of the guys in Kansas City that have been successful have stories about that exact thing. Sometimes it came out of the structure of the Kauffman Foundation or the Hellsberg Mentoring Program. UMKC has a great system. But I think most of it's organic. And so I think most mentees would say, that person's not going to have any interest in me. Why would they have time for me? And the reality is most of them like to talk about their experience. They like to share their experiences, and they want to help young people. They know how hard it is and how much luck is involved and how you have to be able to cut the cord and pull the plug if that little voice inside of you is saying you're not in the right place. I'm not saying quit this afternoon, but make a plan to get out of there, because life is too short to be miserable and be around people you don't respect. So like in our acquisition criteria, number 1 is no a-holes. And number 2 is it's got to be fun. And so if you're surrounded by assholes and you're not having fun, get out of there.
Absolutely.
You know, there's a lot of great places out there. And I think people just feel stuck, and you're not stuck. And if you feel stuck, get unstuck.
My partner and I, one of our definitions of success is being able to work with the people that we want. And I think that's consistent with the no assholes and have fun philosophy that you employ. Okay, last question. I'm really putting you on the hot seat here. I only say this partially in jest. I can tell the difference between red and white wine only because one is chilled and the other is room temperature. So for a guy like me that can't even tell that much difference between a red and a white wine, if I have a chocolate chip cookie or some other baked product with your flour, am I going to be able to tell a difference?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, do it. Go get some regular flour and bake some with ours and bake some with the other stuff, and call me and tell me if I didn't tell you the truth.
Well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to let my sister do it because she's the baby in my family, but I will absolutely do that, Tim.
Have her try the heirloom variety that we make, and that's the one that people that are gluten sensitive can have without any of the inflammation or headache or digestive stuff. It's a really amazing product.
It was fantastic catching up with Tim and hearing his inspiring insights on taking what he's learned from mentors and forging his own path as a leader. Whether or not he's too humble to know it, I'm sure he's also a great mentor to some of his employees. The diamond metaphor turned Tim into a very aware leader. From pricing to market strategy, everything has to be evaluated, polished, and checked on from time to time in order to stay at the highest quality level it can be. I love the idea of the happy croissant. When the flour was good quality, the croissant was happy. But the inconsistency created a sad croissant, and it became a week-to-week gamble. That's why you have to maintain things, because people depend on the products you put out. And if you can't guarantee the quality even week to week, something needs to be adjusted. How do you define success in your business journey? If you were inspired by this episode of Ambition, please share it with a friend or colleague. Thanks for listening.